Welcome back again, race fans, Dirt Track Nutters, talking to the legend Con Migro. Now, Con, we've talked about some big events, some things that you've done in your career. Burswood Dome is another one that was quite iconic. Probably not as successful as you thought it might be, but nonetheless, an amazing event to put on and think about and logistically put on.
Well, it was a huge event and an amazing amount of dirt we brought in. I did that in association with Des Ferris and Brian Lewis. Brian Lewis was a pharmacist in Claremont, and he was the son of the great Harry Tiger Lewis, who was a solo and speed car racer immediately before and after the Second World War. In fact, he's one of the pioneers of speed cars in the state. And Brian was also a director of the Claremont Speedway, and he was a world and Olympic champion in yachting. And multiple 10 or 11, 12 times an Australian yachting champion. Anyway, we decided that we would run an event at the Burswood Dome, and we had to bring in hundreds of thousands of dirt and build a track with a new safety fencing. Miles Thompson helped me out by making sure that the trucks brought the correct amount of dirt in to build the track. One of the problems that they had at that stage we had was the fact that, and I don't know the real reason why it didn't really work, but the fact that the Burswood insisted that tickets would be pre-purchased. And as you know, they're doing it now. In fact, last Saturday night at the Motorplex, the pre-meeting sales were better than the walk-ups. But in those days, people went to Speedway, they just wanted to walk up and pay their money. Now,
they weren't educated to the other way yet.
They weren't. And in fact, even in most days, they used to walk up the football and pay. You remember those things?
Yeah,
you walk up the cricket, you go to the races, or wherever you were going, you walk up, they'd be paying. Also, I had done a deal for Channel 7 to televise the event, and so this was all part of the deal, which I was going to be part of the commentary team. We got the place, and the guy that was running it on behalf of the Burswood Casino, I forget his name now, but he said to me that night, he said, the next day, he said, we had a record over the tables in the casino last night. But the reason why was because when people eventually got it, they were parked back just about to the causeway.
Right,
They couldn't get into the ground because of that was controlled by a ducting through air. And so people had to, they had to pre-buy their tickets. So sometimes when they were getting, the lines were so long, a lot of people thought, it wasn't going to be on. So I don't know about too hard, they thought they were never going to get in, so they decided, we won't go. And so consequently, we burnt it back. We lost, Des, myself and Brian lost huge amount of money. I remember that night, Linda and I had a room at Burswood, and I remember ringing, that was on the Friday night, and we were Friday, Saturday, and I rung Channel 7, because that was the night it was going to be televised. And I rung the chief engineer or director at Channel 7, and I said, look, we can't go ahead with this, because we had to pay for that. I mean, it wasn't going to be for free.
Of course.
We can't afford to. I said, because we've dropped the poultice. I'm talking in the big 6-figure mark, but we weren't going to cancel the show. Anyway, I spoke to him, and he said, leave it to me. And about half an hour later, he rang back and he said, look, Con, he said, you've been a good friend of ours for so long, and we understand what you're telling us, because we do know that people in there said that the crowd wasn't that big last time. We'll televise it anyway.
Unbelievable.
So that was because we built a great relationship. So we televised the show. The event was enormous. The bikes, the sidecars, speed cars. We brought over top drivers like young Stephen Graham from Sydney. That was just a couple we brought over. We had
Max, I think, was
Lee Adams, I think, was in the solos. So we had some pretty brilliant shows. Then Jeff Kendrick put on a demonstration with a sprint car.
Yeah, he did,
You know,
I think even Ron Griggy rushed the speed car that night.
So and we in the speed cars we had half a dozen top heavy hitters from the East. So really wasn't a cent spared as far as the thing. And then we had a demolition derby, but it didn't work. Now, whether it was the venue, whether it was because they thought the crowd was too big going and they thought they weren't going to get in, or whether it was because they were forced to try and pre-buy, we never know. But at the end of the day, in the all wash-up, we lost a lot of money. And another thing too that was made, that wasn't a Claremont Speedway promotion, that was a promotion between three guys, myself, I just mentioned.
So it's personally out of your definitely
out of
pocket.
But the worst part about all that again too was the fact that, again, because the casino had no idea, they had cleaners cleaning up all day, and every time a truck drove in with
and they're charging you for it.
yeah, and there was dust, and these cleaners were cleaning. They must have thought it was Christmas on a stick.
Yeah, I bet. Yeah,
because these guys were cleaning all the time, and of course then Sunday and Monday we had to take all the dirt out.
Well, I was just going to ask you that, because it's not just a one-day event for you.
Yeah.
It's probably 5 or 6, because you've got to rent that, I would assume, to open it up, and you're paying $10,000 a day or whatever it costs you to have
I think it was there was a basketball court and there was tennis courts because they were there at the Hopman Cup, and we had to cover the basketball court and the tennis courts with marine ply, a special marine ply, and then we had to seal it with what we call racers hat. Duck 100-mile-an-hour tape to make sure that there was no dirt or dust would go onto the basketball court or the tennis courts. And then we had to put over black plastic sheeting, so the whole infield of that place, which was a massive thing, it was probably over an acre of land in there, maybe more.
Easy. Easy.
And we covered that with black, heavy-duty plastic, and then we put the sand on it. Or the sand, I mean the
dirt,
speedway dirt. Yeah, so it was a big job. It was the biggest thing since Quo Vadis. And it was our money.
Yeah.
And of course we had to hire the safety fence. We had special track lights made, like warning lights, the greens, the reds, and the things that weren't that we take for granted at a speedway, like the Motorplex or at Claremont Showgrounds these days, or any other speedway for that matter, Albany or Kalgoorlie, that are in place. Yeah. We had to put in.
That's
in the starting gates. We had to put in.
Crazy.
It is. It's crazy.
Yeah.
So over and above the cost of advertising, in those probably 60 or 70, probably $80,000 advertising and all that was done. It was a huge campaign. We didn't spare a cent. But I put that down to experience. I don't blame, but I was very critical after. I was still critical during the time the casino people just didn't quite understand
what
our business. And they say, if you really want to understand someone, there's a saying, you've got to walk a mile in their shoes.
Yeah, they're probably looking at you as like you're a concert. The pre-sale tickets, that's how it works here, and that's the deal. Yeah, unbelievable.
Dealing with rock stars.
Now, when the Royal Agricultural Society said to you, I'm assuming you're sitting at a table at a meeting and said, we're not going to renew the lease in 1998.
Well, what actually happened was that each time that our license or lease agreement was coming to an end, it would start like 12 months before, because because the planning of Speedway, you've touched on, like the Trossels and the English teams of Bowie and all those guys, they weren't just happening on a phone call on Monday and they would be here in a fortnight's time. So they were planned, like the Swedish team and all those teams, they were 4 and 5 years in the making. The American Sprint Car team and the Speed Cars and all were years and years of getting information to them. So we started our negotiating with him, and then one day the RS director called us and said we'd come over, and he said, we just say to you that I think this season will be your last season. And we said, wow. And we said, why? And they said, they had some market research done, again, not by a West Australian company, but by an interstate company that said that they wanted to develop the showground on a theme like Disneyland, and it was going to be called The Land. And so, and it was bringing the city or the country to the city, and so people that live in the city would come down to the Claremont Showground and could see farming life. Probably a little bit like Whiteman Park is today, where there's I don't know, because I weren't privy to that.
Yep.
And so they said that they weren't going to renew it. Now a lot of people, and a rumour goes around, and I suppose 95% of the people you might talk to say, we were moved out there because of the noise.
Noise. Everyone says that.
Absolutely,
but that's
not a fact. Now, I'm not going to say to you or embarrass you or insult you by saying that noise hadn't been part of the problem over many, many years, because it has been, because I can tell you a story about going to court when the town of Claremont took us to court. But this was that they weren't going to renew our licence. Now, they hadn't even given us a chance to get a new venue.
Yeah, 12 months is nothing.
And now, fortunately for me, and it happened to be another Liberal Premier, but the Premier of West Australia was Richard Court, and I knew the Court family well. I knew Richard Court very well. I wouldn't say that Richard Court again was my bosom pal. I'd ring him up and go down the street and have a beer with him.
Yep.
But I knew him well enough, and I used to say to him that the RS really, the way they treat us is terrible. And he used to say to me, why? Because I used to see him quite regularly. He'd say, why? I said, look, they do things that you wouldn't treat your dog like it, because we got the blame for everything that went on. And they used to wear us thin. And he used to say to me, "Oh, look, to me, Con, I believe you're going to be there forever because to me, speedway is the sound of summer." And but he said, "But if you ever get into trouble and I'm around, give me a ring." So when they said they wouldn't retire, the first person that I rung, after probably telling Linda that they were going to renew our licence, I phoned Richard Court and told him, and he was flabbergasted. And he said, "Well, I told you many years ago that you were going, that I would help you if I could." Now, no promises, and that's the reason why we are at Kwinana Beach now. He appointed Graham Kirith, who was a minister in his government. He did say to me, out of all the ministers that are in any government in Australia, if you a to-do man, a man that will see it, start it, drive it and finish it, it'll be Graham Kirith. He said he is the guy, has the intellect and the strength to do it. And it was true. Now, then we started the search and we looked to Forestfield. I didn't like the idea of going up to Wanneroo because I genuinely thought in my mind that Wanneroo was a bit too far. Well, I might be a bit wrong about that now because
it's a pretty big area now.
If you go past Wanneroo now, it goes on and on. Eventually you could say there's houses all the way to Yanship.
But then that might not have been a good thing either.
No. So anyway, but we looked, and I looked at Perth International Airport. There was land there, the Kewdale Marshalling Yards and the Forestfield Marshalling Yards. But we hit a brick wall with Kewdale and Forestfield because the minister or the member for the Kalamunda was John Day, and he said to Richard that if you put that to cabinet, I'll be opposing the fact that I don't want Speedway to be so, but we're miles away from me, so no, I don't want it there. Anyway, so eventually we ended up at Kwinana Beach, and at first really didn't excite me a great deal because I didn't really know a lot about that part of it. Now, bear in mind that the Kwinana Freeway then was controlled by traffic lights, not overhead bridges. So, like today, you can go from the city of Perth, and in 35 minutes you can be at the Motorplex. In those days, you'd be looking at least an hour because traffic lights. Anyway, we built the Motorplex where it is. It's on 60 or 70 hectares. There's a purpose-built speedway, purpose-built drag strip. We have 6 hectares of pit space. It's a purpose-built speedway and bike track and drag strip. And in the meantime, then I joined forces with Gary Milosevich, who was running the drags. At the beginning, he wasn't for it, but he also did realise that I said to him, Gary, I'll tell you now, there's not going to be 2 lots of 60 or 70 hectares of land for both speedway and drags.
They won't allow that.
And I really think if you're wise, you would jump on board with us. And he probably didn't really think that was the case, but anyway, he thought about it, and it turned out to be. Now, a lot of people, and I've got a lot of criticism. Some people say, "Oh, joining forces with drags was not a good move." Well, maybe it wasn't. Maybe it was. I don't know. Time will tell. But what we've got, but towards the end of our time at Claremont, crowds were not big at Claremont. And it was a hard place to promote, and maybe because Friday night was getting even more difficult because the population was growing so big.
Traffic around that area just kept growing.
That's right. Now, and so what actually happened? But then the speedway at Claremont went from the city to the bush because the people thought north of the river that Kwinana was the bush.
It's miles away.
The track that was in the bush was the drag strip at Ravenswood, but they thought they'd come from the bush to the city. So immediately the drag racing
took off.
They were they had the crowds, and Speedway struggled. Apart from the first season, now when everyone's coming to have a look, see. I mean, remember the first night we had a turn away crowd.
We
couldn't get them in the grade.
I think there was 15,000 plus or something.
But we couldn't get them in, and the lights went up because what we'd done whilst we tested all the lights and everything like that. They hadn't tested it when all the catering vans and
everything was up and running,
and then the transporters, because we have reticulated electricity and water to the transporters. Once they all plugged in and flicked it on, with the drain from the actual, it was Western Power too, incidentally, but it was just the drain all of a sudden in one area went from 0 to a million. Bang.
What was the pressure like that night? We'll talk about the Motorplex, and we'll get back to Claremont stuff. We'll jump to the Motorplex now, but what was it like? That first meeting, you've got everything in place as much as you can. You really need some money in the bank by then and get some runs on the board. You put this first thing on, 15,000 people rock up.
Well, here for a start, Richard Court was supposed to be in there at 7:30. I think he got in at 8:30. He was coming to officially open the track. And the first thing he said to me when I go there, Con, he said, you have to do something about the traffic management. And that's another story about traffic management. But anyway, Kenny Ditchfield, who was my track curator, that's Ken Ditchfield's senior son, the pressure on him was so great. He took a turn and was taken to hospital by ambulance.
Unreal.
So here we are. My track curator's in hospital. You can't get the crowd in. The place was Gary Milosevich, who was my partner in the business, or the major partner in the business, he had to go into the main gate. He never met Richard Court. I don't think he saw a thing that happened because he had to get up the front gate and help to allow and bring the public
to get him through. Yeah.
And that was really, and what annoyed me about that was a huge amount of money was spent by, because it was built by the state government, but a huge amount of money was spent by these advisors, and I and Gary both felt that those sorts of things should have been well and truly thought out, and the traffic jams and all those things would never have happened if it had been properly careful. But in fact, the problem that we had getting the crowds in at the opening of that night, we solved ourselves, and we were laymen. We weren't traffic engineers.
Yeah.
And so, hey, what's going on? But anyway, that's what happened, and I think we got caned a bit because we were the first car off the rank. And I think the next week the drags opened and they had a good start, not as big as ours, but I think that a lot of speedway people then were a bit angry, probably not understanding. I remember cars got bogged in the car park. One guy broke his diff, and we felt sorry, so we replaced his diff, and that was about $3,500 or something. And so little things like that went on.
Yeah.
And we tried to be as honourable as we genuinely could, because we felt so bad. So, yeah, the crowd was big, and we were trying to get a bit of money, but we also had, and the motivating thing, in which Gary, I'm not saying Gary didn't agree with me, but I felt that I owed it. The reason that I kept going in Speedway was because I genuinely believed that Speedway needed a home.
Yeah.
I'm not doing to get out of accolades, because I did that. And so that my whole motivation was that we've got to keep these guys racing.
Yes, because you can't stop. Once you stop, that you lose all that stuff.
And so I'd given them my word that we would get a replacement venue for it. So when we started in the year of 2000, it was late December.
Yeah, so 31st, I think it was.
Well, so that was really the competitors. Mainly
15, might be 15.
Whether they want to believe, we run two before Christmas and one Boxing Day, and then we went on, and then the next year. So we've been there 21 years now. We're drawing to the end of our 21st season, and it's been and I get more and more prouder every week. I mean, the last week the Cricky Boys race, a big crowd.
Yeah, it's a good show.
But the venue was magnificent, and Gavin, his team have done a wonderful job. There are now new owners. Another thing that I had to ensure, or I didn't have to, but I made it my focus in life, was to make sure that the new state government at the time, which was the McGowan government, which they are now, but they were going to make sure, because you know how rumours float around, it wasn't going to be continued as a motor racing venue, and all that sort of stuff. And although those are rumours, sometimes they are hurtful, and so I went out to see the Minister for Sport on more than one occasion, Mick Murray. Unfortunately for me, how lucky were we? Mick Murray was this ex-speedway rider. He rode solos. He wasn't a top A-grade rider, but he was a racer. And so he and I had a relationship of some 40 years. I knew his father very well from road racing and motorbike sidecars. So consequently, I got from him that he has guaranteed us that will remain as a motor racing or speedway and drag racing venue for at least the next 20 years.
Yeah, that's cool.
Now,
that's awesome.
In 20 years' time, because everyone said, the new wharf's going to be built there and this is going to happen. But whatever happens in 20 years' time, by that time, the new owners or the new people, whoever's running the place then, can do it. Now, I was not doing that with any authority. Only I did it because, I love the sport, I believed in the sport, and I worked so hard to get us to where we are. I didn't want to see it just plucked out of the sky and then bang. Now, Speedway would go on. We know there are some 33 or 35 tracks from Kununurra to Esperance.
But you need a top-notch place.
The Motorplex is the only 5-star rated track in Australia.
Yeah.
That's not bad for a little old town.
Not bad
and the world's most outward or
way
city, all those things they say about us. But we're not. We're pretty switched on. We bat mother. We fight well above our weight.
Absolutely. I'm going to ask you something, and if you don't want to answer, that's fine, because it's your call. A lot of people have said over the years that when drag racing and speedway got together, and you just went down there, that speedway got a little bit shafted, or you got a little bit shafted, maybe. I'm not putting words in anyone's mouth. I'm just the sort of census of it all, and that we were treated as the second sort of cousin. Is that somewhere around the ballpark, something like that? That you know, Drake's probably had a bit more of the say and a bit more of the go down there.
Well, I think that if you want to be perfectly honest, to this day, you'll find that the drag racing people don't like the speedway because they say we create dirt in the pits and all that stuff.
Okay. Yep.
And where they say their sport's clean, but no, I don't believe that. But there were some. My partner could not understand the aggressiveness with a lot of the people in speedway.
Yep.
And I know a couple of times he said things which he did say to me that he regretted. Like he told one competitor group one night they'd been completely giving him such a hard time. He just said to him, "Look, if you don't shut up, I'll bitumise the infield and make that a car park for drags." You know, now he did say to me at the time that but sometime after he said to me, because I fronted him, I said, "Did you say that?"
Yeah.
Because it's hard enough to run this place without that sort of talk.
Yeah.
And he said, "Yes, I did." And he said, I'm not proud of doing, but I did that because these people give me a hard time.
It's emotion that comes out.
Yeah, and he could not understand the aggressiveness of speedway people. And I was telling you a story before we've done this interview of the chief steward at the Motorplex a couple of weeks ago, when one competitor was berating the chief steward to an extent that I don't know how I would have taken that abuse. And I was so proud of the guy who stood back, and he said a few F's and B's and that, and told the guy, said, "Do you want to know what I mean?" And the steward said to him, "No," he said, "I think you've made it quite clear." And it was so controlled. I thought, good on you, mate. I mean, he went up a million mile in my estimation because I was so proud of him. Whereas it'd been someone like Bert Vosbergen or Jack Hewitt, that person had said that on the ground.
Yeah.
You know, and there wouldn't have been no buts or maybe. Now, we all understand it is a highly emotional sport. We know that, and we know how much we love the sport. But there are sometimes the way some people do talk is quite disappointing. And another thing too, young Gavin said to me some months ago, probably a year ago or something, he said, "Connie," said, "Dad," he said, he said, "You're still doing a great job with the commentary, blah, blah, blah." And I said, "Yeah, I know that." I said, "Oh, thanks, Gav." He said, "But a lot of the people say to me that when things go wrong, they hear it in your voice." And I said, "What?" And I didn't know that, but I apparently am a bit like when the guy crashes,
right?
Because I'm feeling so close to them, although I'm not, I don't know, but I am. But I'm feeling so close that, or if something goes wrong on the racetrack,
you feel it.
Yeah, I don't want to, and I don't like the criticism. You know, like sometimes when people say something about the track, I said, "But it's not the track. It's you, what you guys want, or whatever it might be." And so Gavin says, "Dad, you've just got to let it roll."
Yeah.
Yeah, that's me. Hey,
you're passionate,
and I ain't going to change.
Yeah, we all have our opinions down the track. Don't
of course we do.
Yeah.
Like even when you go to a game of football, the umpire made the wrong decision or he made the right decision.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's the same in a boxing match. You watch a fight between world-class boxers, and you think that the referee's not doing the right thing by one fighter or whatever it might be. You say same in cricket, football, you name it. So like it is.
Now the Motorplex, like we'll talk something really cool about it. That the place is the best, and
no doubt about it.
Regardless of what people think and say, you know, Premier Speedway and Knoxville and all that kind of stuff. They're all great places, don't get me wrong, we're not bagging anyone else. But the Motorplex facility, the way it's built, designed, grass pits, easy access, food vendors for everybody, you can buy whatever you like there. The show that they put on the other night, the Cricket Boys, you had obviously the Cricket Boys shootout, you had WA Speed Car title, and you had WA Late Model title, and you bought a ticket and you had 3 top shelf shows. You know, what an amazing place to go to and enjoy Speedway.
The biggest bang for your buck you'd get anywhere.
Yeah.
And I call it the Motortainment Centre of the West Coast. I don't call it entertainment, I call it Motortainment. It's just one of my little things. I don't know why I say that, but I say it.
Well, you're Con, you can say whatever you like.
And another thing too, in the last couple of years, they have got new caterers there. The new caterer is a young guy, he's got a spring in his foot. He wants to make a quid, and there's no crime in wanting to make a quid, but he's providing excellent food, and which is great.
I had some ribs the other. I mean, how good does that get?
Yeah, brilliant. So there are little things like the show's very good. The fireworks are always brilliant, and and the Speedway, and as I say, if COVID-19 has done something for Speedway, and I don't know if this is the right thing because I'm not privy to all of it. One thing COVID-19 has done, it's allowed a couple of our local boys like David Priolo, Dane Kingshot, Caden Manders, to be driving cars that probably would have normally have been driven by Americans or top interstate drivers.
Yeah, that's true.
That never would be given the chance.
Yep.
They're now back home racing. And then last week we saw Luchmont, he put
Callum
young Callum in the car.
Yep.
What a talent he is. The crowd love him because he's a really nice young man. He's polite, and he doesn't show any animosity at times. I don't know whether he does or he doesn't. But
Never
I
seen
know
him lose his temper ever.
Same with me. And so, we've had the stars aligning pretty well this year. Now, I think that Priolo and Kingshot, Manders and young Williamson have shown enough of their pure homegrown ability to hopefully say to those car owners, hey, if World Series ever happen, they're going, well, we'll take these guys with us. Yeah, so that's been a plus. So we've had more cars stay at home. Probably the biggest disappointment is the numbers of speed cars, but I do know that's building. I see John Fenton's got a new speed car for maybe for the end of the season with his grandson Nicholas.
Yep.
You've got Buddha, Tom Payett in the Toyota powered speed car, the two Golding cars, Alfie Gordon in those cars. They're all top class cars. Tom Payett is a very special talent. Nathan Smee said last week, he said when he's being presented, now this guy has been at the top of the wazza in the sport, he said, I think Tom Payett's as good as any American I've seen. Now that's a pretty big compliment.
Yeah, huge rap.
Now when guys say those things, and the other big thing that's happening in Australian Speedway is that Sydney is now getting a replacement for Parramatta, and there'll be a track being built out towards Eastern Creek, and a speedway track built similar to the lines of ours, and the motorcycle track will be on the inside of the track. And believe you me, irrespective of what people want to say, if you are a promoter or a parent watching your son or your daughter race on a motorbike, and the chance of hitting a fence and getting seriously hurt or worse is a big thing. It's a huge burden. I mean, I've been through that. It's horrible. And so I feel that whilst people might criticise our bikes being on the infield, the pluses outweigh
negatives.
The negatives. Yep. Now, correct me if I'm wrong, and the huge speeds that they're doing now.
Yeah.
You've probably heard me say this a million times, Jace, is that you can hold your breath for a minute and a sprint car has done 5 laps of the speedway. Now, you don't have to be a super athlete to do that. No, so imagine these guys have been going down the shades of 120, 130 miles an hour. They're averaging about 110 for the lap, and they're doing it in 13 and a bit seconds.
Yeah.
My God, here they have done 5 laps, there's a minute. And you see what a 20-car field, I mean, even now, watching it all the years, my heart's in my mouth.
Yeah.
I mean, I can't believe it. Some of the moves they make. Yeah. It's just absolutely mind-blowing.
You hold your breath there.
Now, look at that late model feature race last Saturday. I went 8 or 10 laps before there was a stoppage. But the old fields and Kai Blight, Jay Carty, even Veronica McCann, she was coming until she was picked up by a lap car. Yep. But that race was superb. And they are homegrown talents. There was no internationals or staters in that. It was our local boys.
Absolutely.
So that's good. And that's what the track was designed to do. Another thing we've designed, we've had the crowd sitting in the main and back straights. We've taken them away from the edge of the tracks. I'm not saying that accidents don't happen in straights, because they do, but we have taken that danger out of cars riding a wheel and going over fences. Now, fortunately for us with our design, because it was designed by engineers, we've been able to design a track that keeps them in the ballpark. Another thing we had designed, I had a wish list of what the things I would like to see, and even things like when wheels come off a race car, providing they're on the race track they've been designed that they'll drive around and they'll eventually automatically go to the infield. Yeah. So you'll never see a tyre unless it's in the air, flying through the air. Naturally, we don't know where it's going to go. Yep. But if it's on the ground, going around, it'll eventually drive itself to the infield. I mean, how good's that? Yeah, now, that's because it was a track built specifically for Speedway. It is 22 metres wide in the straights and turns. Claremont Speedway was 18 and a half, or say 18 metres wide in the straights and 22 in the turns. Yeah. So when you'd come out of a turn, being in a 22 wide track, immediately it would be like going into a funnel. Yeah. Now at the Motorplex, and even guys still want more room. The same guys each week hit the fence the same place. I think, man, you've been doing that all season, but it's 22 metres wide in the straights and the turns, 3.5 metre banking. And if anyone's listening to this promotion or this thing today, if they ever want to see it, try and get someone to take them on the infield, and then you see just how big that banking really is. It doesn't look much when you're looking outside.
No, but when you're on the infield.
And even last Saturday night, I took Linda out there when Carl Langdon was doing his little thing for me and saying thank you to me and my son and Stephen and Linda and Gavin. Linda said, I didn't realise it was that steep.
Yeah.
Yeah, see, then she goes there every Saturday night. She's probably a bigger fan than me.
Well, we're going to take another break, and when we come back, we'll keep talking with the legend and icon, Con Migro. Okay, welcome back. We're talking to Con Migro, the legendary promoter of Claremont Speedway and the Quinana Motorplex. Con, I just want to take you back. We've talked a bit about the Motorplex again and stuff, and I want to take you back to Claremont because I think a lot of the history is there. The 30th and 31st of March 2000, you wake up that morning and you know that, hey, this is it, 2 nights to go. You've done so much preparation to put a big show on. How does that 2 nights work out for you emotionally and physically to get to the end?
Well, this might sound melodramatic, but complete numbness. And in fact, often I've sat and spoke to Linda and I don't really remember much about it. It's quite amazing. It was so overwhelming. I'd never, the pouring out of grief, the nice things that were said about myself and to me and also it was just like a whirl, and I couldn't believe it. And then began some of the things the guys did, like they pinched the signs off the fence and took our lights, and oh my God. But it was total disbelief. And then on the Saturday night, I think we finished the show about midnight, or maybe even a bit later, but we had a 10:30 curfew, but there was nothing going to stop the people from staying there. And anyone come then, they would have right. Yeah. And I think I went home about 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning. When I got back about 8:30 on the Sunday morning, at the back of my office, where I left all the John Day boys and Miles Thompson, they're all still there drinking.
Is that right?
Yeah. Oh my God. So yeah, it was a bit of a blur. And you know what? And that's one of the things that, and I was talking to Linda during the week about something that we'd done some years ago when we went to Canberra, and she said, "Where did we stay when we went to Canberra?" Yeah. You know, and so a lot of those things happen in Speedway, and often I might be talking to someone and I'll say to someone, 5 years ago when I was in America, or 5 years ago when I was in Sydney or something, and Linda will say, well, how long? And I say, 4 or 5 years. Well, she'll say, how about 8 years, or how about 10 years? Yeah. And you think, I couldn't be possibly that. Like, so I go back and look at my diary, or look at where I've done, and I say, yeah, she's right. You know? And so, yeah, so I have sometimes lost track of time, and sometimes when the off season used to come, I was thinking, oh, it's going to be a drag, but it wasn't, because by the time I'd been to England or America or Europe, come back and did what I had to do, and then got sponsorships to start the new season with, we were ready to go racing again. Yeah. And so where the competitors had a 6-month layoff,
I was full on. Yeah.
Yes. In fact, this might sound stupid. I didn't have the deadlines I have like in the season, but I used to think and used to say to a lot of people, I am busier in the off season than I am in the on season, because of the and the pressure. And another thing, when you're dealing particularly with Americans, not so much the English, because the English were pretty good. And Nigel Burkott was my contact there. He was brilliant. But a lot of the Americans, they live in a fairly insecure world when you're racing Speedway. When your living comes from what you earn on the racetrack, you're a different breed of person. And often, most of those guys thought that they were going to get a phone call from Paul Newman or JC Agajanan or Chip Canazzi or Roger Penske, and they're going to be the next Indy driver, or Joe Gibbs to go in a NASCAR, you know. And so consequently, whilst they were really, because as you've just acknowledged, we were bringing the best of the best, they were all hoping that the phone would be ringing. It wouldn't be Con Migro. It might have been Roger Penske saying, "Would you like to trim my car in the Indy 500 next year?"
Yeah.
And so they would say, "Yes, I want to go with you," but it would take me, if I was a month or 6 weeks in America, I'd chase them all around America, and there were a lot of drivers that said yes, they were going to come over the years and let me down. I paid airfares for guys that never turned up, and there are other things that people don't know.
Yeah.
So
I heard a story, I don't know how true it is, like was Sammy, I think Des Ferris stayed at his house for ages trying
Well, we
to
both
convince you to get him over here, about 96, 97 season, something like that.
Well, we stayed at Memphis in Tennessee where he lived, and because Sammy Swindell, along with Steve Kinser and Donnie Schatz, those sorts of drivers, they are one-offs, like Kyle Larson and those guys that are there. There's a few others around the scene at the moment, and Tony Stewart and those guys. They are a special breed amongst some very special people that race. Anyway, Sammy Swindell, I'd got to know him reasonably well, and anyway, we went to stay with him. Went to stay at Memphis, Tennessee, not far from where he was living at that time. He has now moved to Bartlett in Tennessee, which is not far, but and Memphis happens to be where Elvis Presley come from. Anyway, we went there and we stayed there, and we rung up Sammy, and we took him. I think we took him to breakfast 2 or 3 days in a row, and we told him he could bring his wife Becky out, and so that, and things were sailing along quite well. And he said, yeah. I think we shook hands. I arranged the guy from Broken Arrow. No, not Broken Arrow. Where was he from? The Dodge City.
Oh, yeah.
Ken Jenkins. So Ken Jenkins was going to be. His car arrived in Perth, painted with his name on it and everything like that. And I think a few days before it happened, he rang me up and said, "Look, yeah, you can't make it." Now, of course, he was at the time wanted to get a NASCAR drive or some other. Now, I don't know the main reason, but he just didn't jump on the plane.
Yeah.
And Des is very hurt about it. Des to this day doesn't think it's well. Though eventually he come and raced at Quinana for Gavin.
Yep, that's right.
And how good was that? But we'd started the ball rolling probably 25 years before that. So they're the things that happen. But when you're dealing, and let me say, dealing with because English people, their humour is similar to Australians, and their outlook on life is similar to us. It's quite surprising. Although Americans speak English, they have sometimes a lot different outlook on their life, and everything that happens in America is the world. Like they have the World Baseball Championship, the World Basketball Championship, and they're only playing amongst themselves. But that's just the way
the world stops at their border.
350 million people there, and you can understand why they feel that way.
Yeah.
And so they do. But so Nigel, I'd say, look, I want Peter Cons, I want Michael Lee, I want John Davis, Andy Smith, and we have my guest list or my wish list, and then eventually get them down, and they would come and race. And between Nigel and myself, I run the itinerary, I underwrote the series, and it doesn't sound. I don't want people to get the impression that I was putting up millions of dollars, because I wasn't. But when I say I underwrote it, I guaranteed them the events that they were going to ride in, and guaranteed if there's any shortfall of money, they would get it.
Yep.
So that was that. I started, and Nigel did the rest. And the bikes or the cars were transported here to Perth. We would pick them up by a shipping agent, which would bring them to Claremont, and then the boys would work on the bikes at Claremont, or the car drivers would go to something like Murphy's workshop or other places they'd work. And so that's how it happened. It's quite amazing. So a lot of enthusiasm, and a lot of the guys that worked on pit crews were guys that were really guys that loved it.
Yeah.
That's my dog.
That's all good.
That's Gavin's dog.
Bye, Gavin. Now, Con, I know you're saying it's a bit of a blur, but do you remember anything about getting on the back of the John Day Ute and doing that last lap?
Yeah. Well, what was that song? Time to Say Goodbye. That song was played by Channel 7.
Yeah.
Jeff Christensen and David Christensen and I were doing the commentary for Channel 7, and that was tremendous. But I do remember that vividly. I mean, like it was though it happened yesterday. But as I say, the outpouring of grief from a lot of people was quite unrealistic. It's a little bit like that happened last Saturday night when I announced my retirement. And not the same, but you were amazed the people that I had phone calls from since that can't believe it, that have rung me and said, "This is not true what I've heard, is it?"
Yeah.
And that's quite flattering to think that people think that way, and I think that's good. I think that, I suppose when I look at the end of my life, or towards the end of my life now, I'm starting to think, well, at least I have touched the lives and made it a better place for whatever reason I tried to do it. And I think Speedway has been my love, and I think that the Speedway has rewarded me too, so it's it's been a two-way street, yeah.
Absolutely. I'm going to say a couple of names, and I'll just get your, sort of reactions to something about them or whatever. Someone like Chum Taylor.
Chum Taylor, well, we used to call him Chum the Master. He was an outstanding rider. He was a very good friend. He made my life pretty miserable when I took over the deal from Orb. I think deep in his heart, he thought that he should have been the crowned with the job.
Okay.
And he and Orb had unfortunately been at loggerheads. Chum was also behind a lot of things that weren't necessarily savoury for Orb. Mm-hmm. And so Orb used to say to me, he told me these things. I mean, I thought it was some people say a lot of things, and I really took it with a pinch of salt. I didn't go around saying, I'm the next boss, because I didn't think that. But he always said to me, I appreciate what you're doing, and that was how he felt. And so I thought that was great. So when I got the job, I think there were a few other car drivers that thought they should have got the gig. Mm-hmm. I didn't set out to prove them wrong, but I did have such a passion for the sport, but I had no specific love for anyone or anything, so I think consequently I could see a big picture, not a solo picture or a speed car picture, who were the top division. So I looked at the sport overall, and I thought, well, this is something that I honestly genuinely believed that Speedway was bigger than waffle football. I'm not saying it's bigger than AFL, and I get sometimes completely disillusioned, even this day, and I know a couple of the scribes around the town were angry with me because I used to say we don't get enough media coverage, and I really wasn't aiming my remarks at them, but when I saw what was happening, the things that guys, I know in my own family, like Gavin when he was racing, if he raced Friday night, he'd work all day Saturday, and every night of the week to get his race car there, and the same with every race that's there. Yep. Now, if he'd had a prank, he used to work doubly hard and long. Yeah.
Someone like Dennis Nash, Jeff Giddos.
Oh, Dennis Nash, what a wonderful rider. What a super athlete. I mean, a big, powerful man, stood about 6'1" or 2. Unbelievable. He was a racer, and he was a guy, he probably doesn't realise that I had a thing in my mind. I thought sidecars were so spectacular. Mm-hmm. But he was one guy that took up the challenge. And for about 10 or 15 years, there was no one in Australia, whether you rode in Perth or Gundagai or Darwin or New Zealand, that would beat him. Yep. And he was one of those sorts of guys, if he got beaten, he would bounce back bigger and better the next week. A great rider. Well, Jeff was his passenger. Unfortunately, passengers don't get the accolades that they deserve, but they're part of the team. It's the rider that gets all the praise, but Dennis Nash is a very special racer, great racer.
The Bullet Rom Cricky.
Oh, well, he won 2 Australian titles. What more? 45 feature races at Claremont. He chose that when Claremont's shingle was hung up, that he hung his crash out up. That was pretty sad for me, because I reckon that he would have gone on for a little longer. I
think so too. I think a lot of people think that Ron could have gone on for a bit longer, but...
Yeah, and I see Ronnie quite regularly. In fact, he looks in better condition now physically than he ever did when he was racing. Now, that's amazing. I don't mean no disrespect, but he looks bloody brilliant. And so, but a wonderful competitor, and he just so much wanted to win. Thus the reason why his emotions took him so over, and when he threw the trophy down the ground, all those sort of things. I'd probably have to ask Ron why he did it, but that was the reason, because I just say he just wanted to.
Oh, we love our heroes and villains.
We do, and it was good. So he made himself a villain, didn't he?
Now, I think your greatest achievement, besides all the Speedway stuff, is keeping your marriage together to your lovely wife. How did you guys go through all that stuff and keep it together? Because it's a lot to take on.
It is a huge amount. In fact, I think when I didn't think it at the time, but I do think it now. I lived a pretty selfish life, and those trips to America and England and Europe, and whilst they sound very romantic, and I'll tell you what they probably were at the beginning, but after a while they become that I knew I was going there to work hard, and I know that if Linda had come with me, I would have ended up in conflict, because you would spend all week, as I was just telling you, getting the guys to put their name, and we never signed contracts with shake of hand, just to get them to say yes, they'd come. They'd give you the runaround. And so, and of course, we'd say we arrived in, say, Kansas City, just an example. We'd fly into Kansas City, and we'd find out where the drivers were staying, and then they'd do their race cars in the car parks, in their transporters, And so I drive around. Now, you imagine if you had your wife or your girlfriend, they really would that. They love speedway, but not that much.
Yeah.
So we'd spend 4 and 5 days leading up to the meeting, driving to the car parks, talking to them in the ground, where the race goes, and then go to the racetrack. Like Knoxville was a 4-day show. Yeah. Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday. And that was good, and it was happening like a royal show or an AFL grand final. They were big crowds.
Yeah.
But to get your wife to be involved in that and not going and doing anything else was tough.
Absolutely.
There are not many places where speedways are in the whole of the world, that's Europe, England, America, that I haven't been to. I reckon I've been to every major track in the world, with the exception of the latest Polish tracks, where the Polish league's being run, that I have been to, that I haven't been to, I should say. I've been to those tracks, and so consequently, I was doing exactly what I loved to do. And you can imagine you've got to be a pretty good woman. So Linda chose to sort of take a bit of a back step, but she still loves the speedway, and she goes down there on a race night. Stephen, my eldest son, picks her up and takes her there. Yep. She's got a favourite. She loves Callum Williamson in the sprint cars, and she loves Veronica. She loves the Oldfield boys. I mean, she's got her favourites in the speedway, and
that's cool.
Yeah, so she's just a fan.
Yeah. Now, a lot of people have thanked you over the years for many different reasons. Some you've had run-ins with, and that's the way it is. I got to personally thank you.
Thanks, mate.
For my start, because I remember as a 19-year-old, I walked up to practice one day, and I said, because I used to love looking at the magazines and opening them up and seeing the photos. Always looked at the photos first, never read the article. And really the photos to me spoke.
You're like me.
Yeah. So I remember walking up to you and at practice, and I said, I called you Mr. Migro that day, because we didn't know each other. And I said, how do I get out on the infield and take pictures of my heroes with the heroes that I respect as photographers? And you said, son, you got no chance at the moment. Do yourself a favour, go and do your apprenticeship. Go do some country tracks. That's what you said to me. 3 years later, I'd gone, once you said that, I went to Bibra Lake, went to Ellenbrook, went to Narrogin, Collie, you name it, did 3 years.
You're a nut.
I came back to practice again, and I said, called you Con that day, I remember this clearly, and I said, Con, I did what you said, I don't think you remember me, but 3 years ago I spoke to you, and I gave you a heap of photos, and you sat down, you said, come here, and you sat down, looked through them, and you said, they don't look too bad, come and see me Friday night early at the office. He said, I can't promise you, the other photographers are going to go off their brain if I let you on, so just come and see me. So I did. I was nervous all Friday, went into the office, and you said, you're on tonight, but I'm just letting you know that if there's something dramas or anything happens or whatever, I've got to kick you off. And I said, no problem. Anyway, so I actually had the courage to walk up. Now, I didn't know much about Peter French and Peter Roebuck. I saw them at different tracks, but didn't really talk to them that much. And I remember walking out there, and the first guy that comes up on his bike was Miles Tomlinson. Says, what are you doing here?
Yeah, Miles.
And I said, Con said it's okay if I'm out here, and I'm not going to make any trouble. I'm just going to do my own thing and keep away from everyone. He said, righto, no problem. And that was my start.
Yeah.
And
thanks, mate.
I haven't looked back, and I've loved the sport ever since. And I just want to say personally, thank you for doing that for me. Yeah. On behalf of all Speedway in Australia, America, and especially Western Australia, everyone wants to say a big thank you for what you've done in the sport.
Thanks, mate.
You've sacrificed your life, even though you've enjoyed it. Yeah. The things that you've gone through and the things that you've done are irreplaceable, won't be replicated. And it's an absolute honour to interview you today and have things like the Perth Motorplex is here because of people like you. So thank you very much, mate.
Thanks, mate. I appreciate your kind words. As I say, I wasn't the only person really, but we're a team, and someone has to drive it, don't they?
Absolutely.
Someone has to be the captain of the ship, and that's how it happened. And going back to the photographers, nothing's changed.
Yeah, still pitch and fight.
I still think there's a bit of animosity and jealousy, and that's good. A bit of professional jealousy is not bad, but it's just that. I'll go to my grave knowing deep down my heart I've done what I consider was the right thing, and I love the sport, and I hope that in 20 or 30 years' time that the place is still going bigger and better than it is today. And Gavin's indicating that his shows he's been putting on, and particularly this year I'm particularly pleased with. So it's in good stead, isn't it?
Yep.
Thanks,
now,
mate.
I'm going to put you on the spot. One last bit. Are you up for a Friday night is Speedway night type of advertisement. I don't want to hurt your throat because we haven't prepared for this. I haven't warned Con about this, but you know, it's an iconic things of the adverts and the Friday night Speedway night, and you'll be there. That's what it was about.
Well, I'll do one for Friday, one for Saturdays.
You go for it. Floor's yours.
Friday night is Speedway night. I mean, Super Speedway Saturday night. Bring someone to hold on to.
There you go. Con Migro, the legend and icon.